He snapped his fingers at me. That was his first mistake. Hey, can you grab me another whiskey, man? Neat. Top shelf. Thanks. I didn't flinch. I just nodded, turned, and walked toward the bar. My name tag was flipped backward. My tie was crooked. My shoes weren't shined. I looked like I didn't belong, and that was entirely the point. Because tonight wasn't about me being seen. It was about me watching. The man who snapped at me? His name was Braxton. Of course it was. The kind of name you'd give a pit bull or a cologne line. He had shoulders like a linebacker and a jawline that probably got its own tax form. Everything about him screamed Wall Street frat king. And tonight, he was center stage. He also happened to be sleeping with my wife. How do I know? Because I read the texts. Because I found the photos. Because I listened to the audio file my friend in IT pulled from her deleted cloud backups. Yeah, that kind of friend. The one you only call when you're ready to ruin your own peace. 3 weeks ago, I would have told you Sienna was just busy, distracted, tired from work, that we were going through a quiet patch. That things happen, that people change. But people don't accidentally call their husband by another man's name in their sleep. Not unless their brain is somewhere else entirely. So when she invited me, insisted I come, to her company's spring social, something didn't add up. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to confirm it. I was going to wear the wrong suit, say the wrong name at check-in, mumble when I spoke. I was going to vanish into the crowd like wallpaper. And while Braxton drank and bragged and kept a hand casually on the small of my wife's back, I was going to become the shadows standing behind them. And when he snapped his fingers at me like I was the help, I realized he had no clue who I was. He didn't know the man he was mocking was the same man who paid the down payment on Sienna's car. He didn't know the guy pouring him a $22 scotch was the same guy who had fixed their water heater last winter when she couldn't reach maintenance. And most of all, he didn't know I had a plan. So I brought him his drink. Appreciate it, he muttered, without even looking at me. Then, as he turned back to Sienna, who hadn't even noticed I was gone, he added, "Some guys just know their place." I smiled, not because he was right, but because I knew something he didn't. This whole night, it was built for him. I wasn't the one who didn't belong here. He was. And by the end of this evening, Braxton would understand, in front of every single one of her coworkers, exactly who I am. And what happens when the quiet guy stops playing dumb? He touched her lower back. That stupid, confident little maneuver guys like him do, like it's second nature. A casual, 2-second press that says, "This is mine," without saying a single word. And she didn't flinch, didn't step away, didn't correct him. She just smiled. The kind of smile I hadn't seen on her face in months. The kind I thought she'd forgotten how to give. But apparently it just needed the right audience. They stood under a glowing ring chandelier, sipping drinks like they were the main characters in a Netflix series. Her red dress shimmered. His blazer looked like it cost more than my car. Every laugh she gave him took a piece of me with it. And I kept watching. Calm, quiet, invisible. Let me clarify something. I'm not a tough guy. I've never thrown a punch. I once dislocated my thumb trying to open a stubborn pickle jar. I write back-end systems for a freight logistics platform. My coworkers are spreadsheets. But I know how to observe. I know how to plan. And most of all, I know how to wait. Braxton didn't notice me again, not even when I circled behind the open bar with a name tag that said Samuel on it. Not mine, of course, just one I picked up from the registration table where extra badges were laid out in neat little rows. No one questioned me. I looked awkward enough to be service staff, which was the exact point. When people think you're beneath them, they stop seeing you. They talk louder. They let secrets spill. It was somewhere between his second and third drink that he leaned in toward her and said it. Does he even suspect anything? His voice was low, but the music dipped for a moment, just enough for me to catch it. Sienna hesitated, just a beat, then shrugged, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "He doesn't ask questions," she replied. "He just trusts me." Braxton chuckled. "Classic. I told you. These guys always convince themselves they're the rock. Meanwhile, they're the rug you walk over to get to the fun part." They both laughed. I didn't blink. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, is that I had prepared for this. For all of this. I'd spent the last 3 weeks collecting screenshots, voice messages, timestamps, GPS pings, and this was the best part. I'd even recorded the conversation Sienna had 2 nights ago when she thought I was asleep on the couch with headphones in. Turns out, White noise masks don't just block out snoring. They also conceal a man taking notes in the dark. And here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't just about me. Sienna's company had strict codes of conduct. Zero tolerance for inappropriate intradepartmental relationships, especially ones involving high-level client accounts, like the one Braxton and Sienna were both assigned to. I'd done my research. I'd even spoken to an employment lawyer. Not because I wanted to get revenge, but because I wanted consequences. Real, public ones. I stepped out from behind the bar and made my way toward the corner booth I had reserved earlier under a fake corporate name. Northridge Analytics. Not a real company, but it sounded real enough to get a spot. I sat down, opened my briefcase, and laid out the envelopes. Each one labeled, each one sealed with copies of what I had. Every printout, every receipt, every explicit text message. Even the one that said, "He thinks I'm staying late to fix a press release. I'm in Braxton's car right now. Send help, face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy, face with tears of joy." Funny. Now I was the one sending help. To her boss. To the firm's legal team. To the wife Braxton swore was just a roommate now. I didn't need to confront them. Not yet. I just needed to wait 5 more minutes. Because at exactly 7:45 p.m., the people in charge of everything, the VP, the HR lead, and the outside investor whose name was plastered all over the event signage, would be walking through those elevator doors. And when they did, they'd find me calmly handing out truth wrapped in manila. Let Braxton touch her back. Let him gloat. He thought I was the waiter. But tonight, I was the messenger. And what I was about to deliver would ruin his meal completely. The moment she saw me sitting in that booth, alone, anonymous, blending in with my carefully chosen obscurity, I saw it in her eyes. Not recognition. Not guilt. Not even surprise. Just a flicker of discomfort. Like the way someone reacts when they see a hairline crack in a glass they'd rather not throw out yet. She looked away. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not like this. I was supposed to be standing behind her, just outside the spotlight, holding her clutch or offering to take her coat. I was supposed to be silent, supportive, easy to ignore. But instead, I was planted in the corner of the room like a fixed point, the one thing that couldn't be spun. Braxton didn't see me. Not yet. He was too busy basking in his own performance, retelling some story about making a power play during a client meeting in Chicago. The punchline involved him standing up mid-call and shouting, "Either sign or get off my runway," which got him a round of performative laughs from a table of junior execs trying to impress him. Sienna leaned in closer. Her hand was on his arm. I felt nothing. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Just emptiness. The kind that comes after the fall, when you realize the thing you were holding on to has already let go. I checked my watch. 7:44 p.m. The elevator dinged. 3 figures stepped out. 2 men in suits. 1 woman in a navy dress. Corporate royalty. The ones who didn't smile unless they had to. I recognized the VP immediately from Sienna's LinkedIn page. The woman beside him was, if I wasn't mistaken, the firm's general counsel. And the man trailing them? The primary investor who just poured $12 million into Sienna's division and had publicly stated he had zero tolerance for internal distractions. Perfect. I stood slowly, picked up my briefcase, moved without urgency. I didn't look at Sienna as I walked past her. I didn't glance at Braxton, who was mid-sentence, his hand theatrically raised like he was pitching a movie. I moved directly to the 3 people now surveying the room like generals before a battle. "Excuse me," I said softly. "May I have a moment?" At first, they blinked, surprised, maybe even annoyed. But then I opened the case. I handed each of them an envelope, clearly labeled, clearly organized. Their eyes flicked down. Something about my calmness made them listen. I didn't need to explain. The contents would do that for me. And then, for a few seconds, the room seemed to bend around them. Their postures shifted, brows furrowed. The VP's mouth formed a tight, neutral line. The woman in navy read faster, flipping through printouts that included time-stamped images of Braxton and Sienna arriving at hotels hours after late meetings supposedly ended. The investor said nothing. He just nodded once, then walked toward the bar. I returned to my booth. Saturday. Waited. And that's when the evening took an unexpected turn. Because instead of confronting them directly, the VP made a signal to a nearby coordinator. I saw him whisper something. Within minutes, a quiet message moved across the floor like a ripple. "There's an issue with the investor's schedule." We'll be pausing the event shortly. People began murmuring. Phones lit up. The DJ turned down the music. Then I watched as Braxton was approached by two members of the firm's security team. It was subtle, professional, but undeniable. They guided him toward the side hallway, away from the crowd. Sienna turned, confused. She followed, but a moment later, someone else stopped her, an older woman in a blazer with a badge clipped to her side. HR maybe. There were no raised voices. No drama. Just quiet separation. I thought it would feel satisfying. It didn't. Because just before they disappeared from view, Sienna turned back. And our eyes met. For the first time that night. Maybe the first time in months, she really saw me. And what I saw in her face wasn't guilt. It wasn't rage. It was worse. It was fear. Not the kind you get when you're caught doing something wrong. The kind that comes when you finally realize the person you thought you could break has stopped playing by the rules. And I should have left then. I should have walked away knowing that I'd done what I came to do. But something kept me frozen in place. Because I knew this wasn't over. And what none of them realized is that this wasn't even the worst thing I had planned. Not by a long shot. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat in my car outside the venue for almost an hour after everything ended, watching guests leave in clusters, none of them knowing what had really happened behind the scenes. Most were too drunk or distracted to notice the subtle implosion. They'd wake up the next morning with champagne headaches and filtered Instagram stories. Sienna wouldn't be one of them. Neither would Braxton. When I finally got home, the house was dark. She hadn't come back yet. I expected that. I imagined she was somewhere trying to convince HR this was a misunderstanding, or maybe blaming Braxton for everything. That's how she operated, never accepting the fall until all exits were sealed. And that's when I realized something that sent a chill through me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't panicked. I was calculating. Cold. Focused. Sometime around 3 a.m., I opened her laptop. She never logged out of her work email. She assumed I never touched her things. She was right, until now. I hesitated for exactly 1 second before opening her inbox. That's when I saw it. The subject line, need a path forward, urgent. Sent to a name I didn't recognize, Damien R. But the domain was the same as her company. The body of the email was short, defensive, and frantic. I want to be clear that I never intended for my personal life to impact our client relationship. If there's anything I can do to help navigate the fallout from tonight, please advise. Braxton crossed lines. I was caught in the middle. I value my position. I need options. No apology. No acknowledgement. No remorse. Just damage control. And that's when I realized I had underestimated her. Because this wasn't a woman who had been swept up in a passionate affair. This wasn't a bored wife who'd made a mistake. This was someone who had calculated her risks and moved forward anyway, thinking she'd always have time to fix it. She didn't expect consequences. She expected negotiation. So I gave her none. I didn't reply. I didn't confront her. Instead, I took screenshots of the message. I added them to the folder. I updated the timestamps. That morning, she came home at 6:41 a.m. Hair messy, heels in hand, wearing the same dress from the night before and the look of someone who'd just barely escaped a burning house. She didn't say anything at first. She walked into the kitchen, poured water, and sat at the table like we were going to talk about a rough day. I watched her closely. Her breathing was shallow. Her hands trembled just slightly. She looked at me, trying to decide which version of herself to perform. I know you probably heard things, she started slowly. And I need you to understand that not everything is as it looks. I didn't respond. I just stared. She continued. Braxton he crossed a line. He's been inappropriate for a while now. I never wanted it to get messy. I was scared to say anything. He's been pressuring me, manipulating things. And now it's all just blown up. I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to protect us. Protect us. Those words hit me like a slap. She wasn't even denying it. She was reframing it, making herself the victim, spinning the story before the truth could anchor. I could have confronted her right there, could have thrown the printed emails on the table, but I didn't. Because the moment she said, protect us, I understood something new. Sienna wasn't just afraid of losing her job. She was afraid of losing control. And what she didn't know, what I wasn't going to tell her yet, was that the investor from the night before had already replied to my message, that he wanted to meet, that he'd heard rumors about internal conflicts and was grateful for clarity. And most important of all, He'd forwarded the entire report to someone named Vera Lang. I Googled her. Head of Crisis PR, external. Brought in only when reputations were on the verge of collapse. Sienna hadn't just lost control. She had invited me into the cockpit without realizing I had already cut the brakes. This wasn't about catching her anymore. It was about watching how far she'd fall before she begged me to help her land. It was 2 days later when the second crack formed. Not in our marriage. That part was already broken beyond repair, but in her carefully curated professional armor. Up until that point, Sienna still operated under the illusion that she could fix things with charm, apologies, and maybe a few strategic emails. She kept her head down, worked late, replied to messages like her job depended on every syllable, and acted like if she just typed fast enough, none of it would catch up to her. But she didn't know about Vera Lang. And she definitely didn't know about me and Vera. It started with a phone call. I was sitting in my car outside the dry cleaners, trying to decide whether I should pick up my suit, the one from the night of the mixer, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Mr. Rundle? The voice was cool, measured, controlled. This is Vera Lang. I understand you've been in contact with Mr. Dervin regarding internal conduct issues at Covey Strategies? I sat upright. Yes. I submitted some documentation. You submitted a surgical strike, she corrected. Which, frankly, saved us weeks of chaos. I don't typically contact outside parties directly, but your presentation was precise. And you knew exactly who needed to see it. You have a knack for clarity. That might have been the first compliment I'd received in months. She continued. I'd like to invite you to a meeting. Off the record, of course. There are implications to what you provided that stretch beyond HR violations. Now that made me pause. Implications. What she didn't know, or maybe she did, was that I hadn't sent everything yet. What I'd given the firm was enough to expose Braxton's behavior, enough to raise serious questions about Sienna's conduct, but it wasn't the full story. Not even close. I agreed to the meeting. It took place the next morning, in a private suite at a boutique hotel downtown. When I walked in, Vera was already seated, tablet in hand, her silver hair tied back in a knot so tight it could slice marble. She didn't offer small talk. She simply tapped the screen and turned it toward me. Sienna's face filled the display. A video. At first I didn't recognize it. Then I did. It was a clip taken at an after-party, one I hadn't known about. She was drunk, sitting on Braxton's lap, whispering into his ear, giggling like a college freshman. The camera angle was angled slightly from above. Someone had recorded it quietly, probably for blackmail, gossip, or revenge. She was representing the company at this event, Vera said flatly. The man beside her is in direct conflict with a client she was pitching 2 days later. That client has since pulled out. I blinked. I didn't take that video. I know. There was a pause. A deliberate one. We believe Braxton's behavior wasn't isolated. And we believe your wife may have facilitated more than one inappropriate convergence of business and personal interest. Which means this isn't just a scandal, Mr. Rundle. It's a liability. She leaned forward. You're not just the betrayed husband in this story. You're the only person who seems to have connected the dots before this thing blew wide open. You understand patterns, behavior, paper trails, and most importantly, you were watching when everyone else was performing. I stared at her, unsure of what to say. And then she said something that I haven't been able to shake since. I need someone who understands what's really at stake. Someone whose emotions have already been carved down to bone. I don't need rage. I need perspective. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. But I didn't say no either. Because that moment, that precise second, I realized the power had shifted again. Sienna had always painted herself as the power player. But now, she was the headline. And I was the byline she never thought would show up on the story. The first time I saw Sienna cry during all this, it wasn't because she was sorry. It was because she realized she'd lost control of the narrative. It happened 5 days after the mixer. 5 days that felt like a slow, suffocating collapse. On the outside, things were quiet. No big scenes. No screaming matches. We were still living in the same house, still brushing shoulders in the hallway like strangers in a shared Airbnb. But the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, predictive, like the hush before a courtroom verdict. That morning, she sat at the edge of the bed, her phone glowing in one hand, her other pressed flat against her temple. Her inbox must have been a battlefield. She was biting her lower lip the way she always did when trying to hide a tremble. I didn't say a word. I stood in the doorway with a cup of coffee, waiting to see which version of her would appear. She didn't speak for nearly a minute. Then, finally, someone leaked internal footage to legal. I sipped. Footage? Her eyes darted toward me, just for a second. From that night. At Slate and Ember. From inside the firm's private Slack. I thought everything was deleted. It wasn't. Because I had it. And I hadn't leaked it. Yet. But I wasn't the only one watching. Someone else inside her company had started pulling on the thread. Maybe someone who'd been stepped over. Maybe someone who watched Braxton parade around like a god and Sienna pretend she was untouchable. Either way, the storm was now coming from more than one direction. The walls were tightening. I didn't need to say a thing. She was unraveling without me. That same afternoon, Vera texted me. Just a single line. She's scrambling. Stay silent. You're winning. It didn't feel like winning. Not really. I felt like I was watching someone I used to love drown in water she poured herself, and I was holding the rope, but not throwing it. I told myself it was justice. But there were moments, sharp and intrusive, where I wondered if I was becoming something worse than betrayed. I was becoming addicted to the power. Later that night, Sienna knocked on my office door. That alone was strange. We hadn't knocked in years. She entered slowly, wearing an oversized hoodie that didn't belong to her and no makeup, like she wanted to remind me she was human again. She sat on the edge of the couch and took a shaky breath. I know you hate me, she whispered. I didn't answer. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to understand something. Braxton was an escape. It wasn't love. It wasn't about replacing you. It was about feeling like I mattered somewhere. Like I had power again. But he used me. He treated me like I was disposable. And now, she trailed off. Now it's all gone, I thought. Your leverage. Your shield. Your advantage. She looked up at me, her eyes red but dry. If I lose this job, I don't know who I am anymore. There it was. The root of it all. This wasn't about me. It never was. It was about identity. About who she became when the world started treating her like someone important. And who she feared she'd become if it all got stripped away. And for the first time, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then she added something that made my stomach turn. If you could just talk to Vera, tell her it wasn't what it looked like. I know she respects you. I know you talked to her. Just help me put the pieces back together. I stared at her. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for a lifeline. She thought I still wanted to protect her. And for a moment, I thought maybe I did. But then I remembered the nights I sat awake wondering why my wife looked at her phone more than she looked at me. The excuses. The gaslighting. The smile she gave Braxton. The one she told me she didn't remember. So I said what she never expected. I'm not here to protect you anymore, Sienna. I'm here to finish what you started. Her face went blank. Like I just unplugged her from the Matrix. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. And in that moment, she looked so small. And that's when I knew. I wasn't the one who'd been broken. I was the one who walked through the fire and kept walking. And she was just realizing the fire never stopped burning. The company conference was scheduled a month before the scandal broke, but they didn't cancel it. That's the thing about corporate machines. Even when parts fall off, they just keep moving. The PR team tried to patch the event together, framing it as a celebration of resilience and reinvention, which was ironic considering two of the keynote speakers were no longer employed. Braxton's name was scrubbed from the agenda like he'd never existed. But Sienna? She was still on the schedule. Still listed as Director of Strategic Communications. Still standing under a spotlight, even though she was one whisper away from being drowned in it. I wasn't supposed to be there. She didn't know I RSVP'd using a friend's name. She didn't know I still had access to the registration portal. And she definitely didn't know I was sitting near the back of the ballroom, dressed like one of the many faceless consultants drifting through the event, sipping hotel coffee and waiting for the free lunch. I watched her step onto that stage like nothing had happened. Hair sleek, posture perfect. Her voice didn't tremble. Her words were polished. That was her superpower. She could lie while looking directly into the lens, and people wanted to believe her. She spoke about adaptability, about trust, about rebuilding. Sometimes the greatest challenges come from within, she said, her hands gently clasped. And sometimes we have to admit we've made missteps in order to evolve. Elegant. Measured. It was almost impressive until she crossed the line. In any strong partnership, she continued, Personal or professional, there must be honesty. I'm proud to say I've always held myself to that standard, even in moments of adversity. I laughed, out loud, not loud enough to cause a scene, just enough to hear myself break. She looked straight ahead, but for a split second, her composure cracked. One blink too long, one breath that stuck in her throat, and I knew she saw me. She just couldn't show it. When she stepped down, there was polite applause. It wasn't enthusiastic, it was cautious. People weren't sure what they were clapping for anymore. An hour later, the event organizers announced a schedule adjustment. Sienna's second panel, a live Q&A on reputation management, was quietly removed. I knew why. Because someone had just uploaded a new file to the press tip inbox used by tech reporters. A PDF compiled from 2 untraceable email accounts, filled with everything that hadn't made it into the HR complaint. Not just the texts, not just the photos, but testimony, logs, flight confirmations, expense report anomalies. I didn't upload it, but I had passed the folder to someone who would. Her name was Quinn. She was a junior staffer, sharp as glass, the type who'd watch Sienna take credit for her work and smile doing it. I never asked her to do anything. I just showed her the truth. She chose what to do with it. That's what made it perfect. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even need to be the one who pulled the final lever. All I had to do was remove the illusion of who Sienna was, and let the people around her decide how far she'd fall. Later that evening, when we were home again in that too-quiet house, she finally cracked. Not with rage, not with denial. She sat on the floor, back against the kitchen cabinets, knees pulled to her chest like a child. I don't know how to be anyone else, she whispered. Everything I built, everything I was good at, it's all poison now. I said nothing. She looked up at me with hollow eyes. You win, she said. Is that what you want to hear? You win, Wendell. But she didn't get it. This was never about winning. It was about stopping the lie. The one she told everyone, and the one I kept telling myself. That love makes it okay to be small. That silence is noble. That trust can survive betrayal if you just believe hard enough. But belief without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. And I wasn't surrendering anymore. I never got a thank you. Not for the years I stood beside her. Not for the nights I stayed up fixing her printer at 2 a.m. Or the weekends I spent proofreading decks I didn't understand, just so she could sleep. And certainly not for the way I kept her secret long after it stopped being a secret. But I didn't need a thank you anymore. I needed peace. It came quietly, like most real things do. The day after her public fallout, after the panel was pulled, after the reporters began circling like sharks, Sienna took a leave of absence. Not a resignation, not officially. Just a graceful pause, meant to soften the headlines. We both knew it was the beginning of the end. She stayed in the guest room for a while. The same guest room I had painted myself the summer we moved in. It used to smell like fresh pine and new starts. Now it just felt like a holding cell for someone who used to be important. We didn't fight. We didn't scream. It was worse than that. We became roommates with memories. Memories that echoed around the corners of our home like voices in an empty museum. Once beautiful, now just relics. One evening, after days of silence, I found a letter on my desk. Handwritten. No envelope. Wendell, I don't know how to ask for forgiveness, so I won't. But I want you to know I've been reading the things you didn't say. The things I never gave you credit for. And I'm sorry I spent so long performing a life instead of building one with you. When you're ready to be free of me, I won't fight it. I folded the letter, tucked it into the back of my desk drawer, and never mentioned it. Some truths don't need answers. Just acknowledgement. 3 weeks later, I filed for divorce. She didn't contest it. No drama. No threats. Just 2 signatures on a paper that marked the end of something that had already died long before. And then, finally, I left. But I didn't leave angry. I didn't storm out or slam the door. I packed carefully. Box by box. Room by room. I left the furniture she picked out, the decor she loved, the kitchen appliances I never figured out how to use. I left behind the things that made the house hers. And I took with me only what I needed to start over. I moved into a smaller apartment on the other side of the city. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom. 2nd floor. A balcony just big enough for a chair and a coffee mug. But for the first time in years, I wake up without holding my breath. I go for walks. I cook badly. I read books that aren't about efficiency or leadership. I even signed up for a ceramics class on Thursdays. And yeah, I'm the worst in the room. But no one there knows me as Sienna's husband. I'm just Wendell, the quiet guy who listens more than he talks and always brings his own mug. One afternoon, after class, a woman named June, mid-30s, soft voice, paint under her nails, sat beside me and said, "Your hands shake less when you're not overthinking." I smiled. She wasn't wrong. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need to win. I didn't need to destroy Sienna. I didn't even need closure. I just needed to stop asking for love from someone who only offered power. Now, I choose quiet. I choose peace. And when people snap their fingers at me, I don't bring them a drink anymore. I leave the room.